Trucker Dump for January 1st, 2011, episode 61. E-Logs, my first impression.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Happy New Year's Day, everyone. Hope your head isn't in a toilet right now. Mine isn't, because like many over-the-road truckers, I'm on the road. You see, we usually have to pick between being home on Christmas or New Year's Eve. That's the drawback of them being only a week apart. But enough of my pity party. I guess I should introduce myself for anyone who's still wasted and accidentally stumbled in here. Todd McCann here. Well, while many of you are anxiously anticipating the new year, I'm experiencing a sense of foreboding. To explain my trepidation, I only have to give you the title of this week's podcast, E-Logs, my first impression. Despite the fact that I've been driving for 13 years, I made a bonehead rookie mistake yesterday. It was especially unfortunate since it probably would have been covered if it didn't coincide with my first day running with E-Logs. But first, what are E-Logs? E-Logs are electronic logs. For more details, you may want to jump back to a previous podcast of mine before you read on. I gave it the appropriate title of Fear and Loathing of Electronic Logs. As my truck was getting E-Logs installed, I was taking a class on how to use them. I went in grumpy and hating them. 4 hours later, I came out with a slightly less grumpy disposition and a lower hate factor, but I'm still not doing round-off double-back handsprings. And thank God for that. I wouldn't want you to see my cheerleading panties. One thing I knew going in was that each company can set up E-Logs according to their own guidelines. This is something that Dean had informed me of in the podcast I mentioned earlier. Knowing my company, this was what I was most worried about. My worries weren't unfounded. For example, Dean's company has their E-Logs set up where he can creep along 7 miles an hour or less in rush hour traffic and still be on the on-duty, not driving line. My company has it set to go to the driving line after a half mile, no matter what your speed is. It used to be set at 1 mile, but they decided this was way too far. Keep this under your hat, but I think mine is still set at 1 mile. Shh. When they mentioned this in class, all three of us drivers started talking at once. Our concern was this. Many times we'll be parked at a shipper or receiver waiting for a dock. Or maybe we got there the night before. Either way, if it's going to be a while, we'll start our 10-hour break. At some point, we're going to have to wake up and back into a dock. Now, there are a lot of massive warehouses out there. Some of them even have off-site buildings. Many of them will require us to drive over a half mile to get to the dock. That will effectively break our mandatory 10-hour rest period. The company is aware of this and is looking into it. For now, the fix is to call into the safety department and let them know what happened. If they can verify you never left the property, they'll fix it. While it's good to hear they'll do that, it's a big fail in my book. Still stranger, I'm thinking they wouldn't even have this problem if they had just left the 1 mile limit in effect. Although that still wouldn't fix the off-site problem. Next, I ask about a situation that happened to me not long ago. I had enough hours to get to my delivery location, but they didn't have any parking. My plan was to park at a nearby Lowe's that I'd been parking at for years. Since I didn't have enough time to fit in a 10-hour break before my delivery appointment, I was just going to drive the 5 miles from Lowe's to the customer and show them my paper logs that I had been at the delivery point all night. Illegal? Technically, yes. Done frequently by truckers? Definitely yes. Able to do on E-Logs? Nope. That was my plan anyway. What actually happened is a tow truck driver knocked on my door and told me he was instructed to tow any truck that wouldn't leave the Lowe's parking lot. Naturally, I left. Here's the thing though. I was about 7.5 hours into my break. If I had been out 8 hours, I could have used it as part of a split sleeper berth, moved and gotten my other 2 hours somewhere else. Since it wasn't, I moved, pretended I didn't, and delivered my load on time. But that was only possible because I was on paper logs. I asked the trainer about this scenario and was told that since I didn't have any hours available and I had to move before my 10-hour break was completed, I'd be charged with a log violation. She did say that the company would note the situation along with the violation so that it could be seen that I had no choice in the matter. While this sucks more than a dehydrated mosquito, that's not the worst of it. Since I had moved before completing my 10-hour break and I hadn't even gotten 8 hours in to set up a possible split sleeper berth, I'd now have to start my break over. So now my mandatory 10-hour break has just turned into a mandatory 17.5-hour break. That's my wasted 7.5 hours that didn't count, plus my new 10-hour break. Furthermore, I'm sitting 5 miles from my delivery point, but now I can't deliver because I don't have any driving time. In this situation, another driver would have to come and deliver my load. The trainer said the fix for this problem was to plan ahead. If you know that a receiver doesn't have parking, tell your dispatcher how close you can get and they'll find another driver to relay the load. This is going to lead to a lot of relays, especially since my company doesn't always know which customers allow parking and which don't. Even crappier is that many times you can get within the same city as the receiver, you just can't park at their facility. Since my company doesn't pay a dime for local runs within the same city, many of these runs won't pay anything except for the miles it takes you to get to the relay point. So the guy doing that relay from me would have been hosed on money. While all this sounds easy enough, what about those situations like the one I was in? I'd been parking at that Lowe's for years. How was I to know they'd changed the rules all of a sudden? Or how about those times when you park somewhere questionable because you've run out of driving time? Truckers are forced to move all the time for reasons such as this. Heck, I just talked about that in a recent podcast. Who gets stuck with the log violation, the ticket if we get caught, and possibly a service failure if the load can't be delivered on time? Once again, it all comes back to the driver. Here's the next thing that didn't make sense. Any calls to breakdown must be done during on-duty time. So say you pull into a truck stop, do your walk around, and notice a flat tire. You call in a breakdown while you're still on duty, then you check into the shop at the truck stop. They say it'll be about 3 hours before they can fit you in. That's fine. I'll just go to sleep until then, get my 2 hours of my split sleeper berth in, and finish the other 8 hours after I'm out of the shop, right? Wrong. The new e-log rules say that when you're awaiting repairs, you have to log it as on-duty time. So not only are you wasting time that could be going towards your 10-hour break, you're also using up your hours on your 70-hour work week. Can someone please explain to me how this is any different from moving on a customer's property to bump a dock? Because my e-log trainer couldn't. One thing I was anticipating was for them to say how much time e-logs would save me. It came as expected. She said, "Using paper logs, you have to log 15 minutes for fueling, even if it only takes you 5 minutes. Now if it takes you 5 minutes, it saves you 10 full minutes of driving time." To which I responded, "But isn't logging 15 minutes for fueling a company policy?" It was. Federal guidelines say that anything under 7 minutes doesn't have to be logged other than flagging it. So in essence, we're losing 15 minutes because under DOT rules, we wouldn't even have to show fueling if it took under 5 minutes. No good answer followed. I have to break in here with an amendment that I made later on. I later discovered that any time working has to be logged. So I was mistaken about this, and so was my e-log trainer. Gee, that's comforting. If they can't get it right, how the heck am I supposed to? So in the above scenario, even if I managed to fuel in 5 minutes, I'd still have to log it as 15 minutes on my paper log. So now that that's as clear as a tornado sky, let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. Next was the mandatory pre-trip inspection. 15 minutes minimum is the standard for both carriers and the DOT. As I happily pointed out, here's another 15 minutes lost. Before, I could log my pre-trip inspection when I fueled, no matter what time of day it was. Now you're telling me I have to do it at the beginning of the day, and it can't be combined with any other activity. Again, no explanation. Now back to my rookie mistake. I got my load information and wrote it all down. For some reason, my brain decided that my delivery time of 1300, that's 1 p.m., was actually 3 p.m. I don't know how that happened. I'm guessing the 3 and 1300 stuck in my demented brain. Anyway, here's how e-logs affected this situation. Since I got this load information the day before and I didn't want to sit around and wait, I'd already asked if I could deliver early. No one would respond to my dispatcher, so I never got an answer. Now, if I had been on paper logs, I no doubt would have taken off extra early and tried to deliver before my appointment time. If the customer would have taken me early, all would be well. If they wouldn't take me until my appointment time, I would have simply showed taking off a couple hours later on my logs. Again, illegal? Yep. Done by truckers every day? No doubt. Instead, I waited until the very last minute to take off. I knew that the second I rolled out, my 14-hour clock started ticking. If I rolled out too early and couldn't deliver, I'd have burned all that time while I sat waiting on my appointment. I wasn't going to do that. The problem was, I only left in time to deliver by 3 p.m. When my dispatcher called me to ask why I wasn't heading toward my delivery, I knew I had screwed the pooch. I'd planned on rolling in by 3 p.m. Now I was going to be 2 hours late. Luckily, I have a cool dispatcher who knows I don't make rookie mistakes like that very often. It was also lucky that there was a heavy fog out that she could blame my lateness on. I'm telling you folks, I've got the coolest dispatcher. Still, if everyone on e-logs is trying to maximize their time, it seems to me that it will put a whole lot of truckers in a race against time. Does anyone think that's a good idea? So now that my first day with e-logs is completed, here's my initial impression. They're fairly easy to learn and use. It has some cool features that I didn't have before, such as a running total of my hours, always knowing what city and state I'm in, and how it automatically knows when I arrive at a customer. While all that's great, the ability to search and read messages while I'm driving is my favorite feature. My old Qualcomm unit wouldn't let me read a message unless I was at a complete stop. They say that I still can't type while I'm going down the road, which is to be expected. Again, I think they forgot to disable this feature in my unit, because I've tried typing going down the road and it works just dandy. Of course, I'm not planning to abuse this, but still. Shh. I'm convinced that the trucking industry is going to have to change if e-logs are going to work. Shippers and receivers in particular are going to have to start caring about a trucker's time. And if some of the new proposed rules, such as the hard 14-hour workday, take hold, it'll be even more necessary. I just don't think e-logs are quite ready for the weird situations that truckers find themselves in every day. To sum up, I think the key isn't the e-logs themselves. The key is how they're set up. E-logs can be as flexible as a double-jointed gymnast or as rigid as an Eskimo's clothesline laundry. Here's to hoping that trucking companies prefer leotards over stiff boxer shorts.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Well, once again, my peeps have risen to the occasion. Here's what they had to say about my podcast called Truckers versus Cops versus DOT versus Carriers. That's the one with my bad experience with the cop. Christy makes an excellent point here. She says, it's a shame that some of the hardasses ruin it for the men and women in uniform that actually have hearts and brains. Common sense, a rare commodity when it's wrapped up in a uniform and a gun. I think we truckers and cops have a lot in common, actually. Both groups are under a lot of stress. Both groups have to jump through hoops to satisfy their higher-ups. We share high divorce rates, depression, and even suicide. We share lousy diets and eating while sitting behind the wheel. There's way too much expected from the professional driver anymore. We have no leeway, no breathing room. They want perfection, but after dividing our take-home pay by the hours we worked, we're lucky to average $10 an hour. I think they should just mandate the military to take over the trucking industry. They can be perfect little sheep because they're used to doing what they're told. Your dispatcher is a real a-hole to put you in the position that they did. But still, as it falls down on us to make the final choice and say no, it all falls down on us. Whatever it is, we are always in the wrong. They don't call this the last American sweatshop for nothing. What I'd like to know is, when is enough enough? When are the professional drivers, the truckers, going to start taking action and start emailing their state lawmakers or flooding the local newspapers with the true horror stories of what's going on in this industry? Trust me when I tell you this, it'll get worse before it gets better, if it ever does. And here I sit for over 7 hours, and I'll run out of time in their docks, unpaid to sit here. Guess I'll take a nap and dream of a good meal and a hot shower, since I won't be getting either one of those anytime in the near future. Well, Christy, you've made some excellent points here. While it's true that cops and truckers have a lot in common, there is one big difference. Cops have authority over truckers. That's a biggie. I also believe that we're a lot more considerate of them than they are of us. I'm not saying they're completely uncaring. I know they aren't. Cops have every right to tell us not to idle our trucks in non-idling jurisdictions, but most of them don't bother. Many cops will leave you alone if you're parked right beside a no parking sign on the exit ramp of a rest area. Most won't even look twice at you if you're driving 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. I probably came off a bit harsh on the cops. Still, when they want something done, it's exactly as I stated. They don't care about your company rules or that you're defying the DOT laws. As long as you do what they say, all is well. As for drivers saying no, you're exactly right, for the most part. If my company ever asked me to run illegal, which they don't, I'd tell them no. But I dare you to try that with an officer who's telling you to move in the middle of your sleep. You're going to have to run illegal to find another parking spot, and there ain't squat that any driver can do about it. Even if someone were to defy the cop by saying that they couldn't move because of the DOT rules, the driver would still end up losing. If a cop is asking you to move, it's for a reason. So off the driver goes, in risk of being caught for driving without hours. I love what you said about getting involved with the media and politicians. I've got to be honest. I've always been one to gripe about stuff and not do anything about it. I think most people are that way. Lately, though, I'm beginning to see the error of my ways. I mean, look at it. I write a letter to my safety director, and next thing you know, I'm getting scheduled for an appointment to discuss things with some company bigwigs. Not long after, I call a chief of police to discuss the way an officer handled a situation. Next thing you know, I'm looking at a non-point violation instead of the CSA bruising kind of ticket. Perhaps the squeaky wheel gets the grease is a popular saying for a reason. Tracy Lynn writes, "Another excellent post, Todd. You have a valid point. I've seen it in action myself. The cops, DOT, FMCSA, they all have their own agendas. They do know about the rules and regulations from each other, but they turn it into a pissing game to see who's higher on the ladder that day. Cops think DOT are peons, and DOT thinks everybody is a peon. I took enough BS on the phone from DOT, so I actually drove to Lansing to speak to His Highness face to face. Of course, he left me sitting for 5 hours before he would see me, but that was to my benefit. I had plenty of time to think all the stupid stuff DOT does, so I was able to make a long list. I can't say that I got a lot accomplished other than that. After showing him my tape recorder, he stopped calling me Little Missy. I miss the road. I do not miss the idiotic agencies that are allowed to treat people like morons. Kudos to you." Well, thanks for the backup, Tracy Lynn. As I agreed with Christy earlier, you do things the right way. You find an injustice and you act on it. DOT are boneheads? You go for a visit. Smuckers treats some truckers like dispensable people? You call them out. The world would be a better place if we all took a bigger part. I'm going to try to start doing just that. Thanks for your comment, Little Missy. Jason simply says, "Great post as always, Todd. At least you got the fine reduced. Be safe." Well, thanks, Jason. That's true. The points are the killer for the trucker. Still, $101.50 court costs on a $30 fine? Someone help me up. My wrists seem to be attached to my ankles. Helmet or Heels writes and says, "Wow, I had no idea about all the things truckers go through. Seriously, get a writing job or write a book. Get out of trucking." Well, Helmet or Heels, you haven't heard the half of it. As for me writing and getting out of trucking, well, I doubt one of those things will ever happen. Thanks for leaving your comment. Next up, of course, Lisa Nowak pops in with a one-liner. "I hope that cop gets a stale donut in his stocking this year. Merry Christmas." Well, Lisa, I'll put in a call to Santa. And Kat responds to her, "Only one stale donut? Darn." That was my alteration. I'd give him a dozen. As for the price of the court, holy... yeah, daylight robbery from the very people who are supposed to stop robberies. She goes on to say, "Thanks for your blogs. I've found them entertaining and delightful to read." Well, Kat, you might enjoy the podcast even more. Back to her. And I agree with you. Truckers have enough to worry about without adding in a sarcastic, grumpy, know-it-all, peacock badge-wearing cop who wouldn't know the frustrations that truckers face each day if they all jumped up at once and bit him on the ass. I think all cops and politicians, DOT, etc. should be made to drive a rig for at least a month before they're allowed into service at being a cop or DOT or whatever. That way they'd at least have walked a mile in our shoes and hopefully realize how funked up some rules and regulations are. Whew. About slipped on that one. Keep safe and keep on trucking. Well, Kat, thanks again for another entertaining comment. I'm glad you're enjoying the blog. I'm certainly getting a kick out of your comments. You're a spirited one, aren't you? I love the idea of everyone having to take a ride in a truck in rush hour traffic before they can be issued a driver's license. If you think of a good way to accomplish this massive undertaking, be sure to let me know. Perhaps at gunpoint. I respect the job that the cops have to do, but clearly some of them don't have a clue what they're doing when it comes to trucks. I once had an officer look right at my log, which was off by a couple hours. A blind man could have seen it. He didn't. So either he was blind, or he was in a really generous mood. I'm guessing the former. Cheryl writes in and says, "Holy buckets, I agree with Pam. You should write a book. I'll edit. Merry Christmas." Well, Cheryl, thanks for the little comment, but don't writers make even less than truckers? And what's all this stuff with me writing a book anyway? Whoops, nuts. Sorry, somebody just started idling right behind me. Hope you can't hear that. I rolled up all the windows. Anyway, we go on with a comment from Amanda. She said, "Thanks for the good explanation of the 34-hour rule. I had seen mentions of it on Twitter, but I didn't fully know what it meant. I appreciate this glimpse into the rules and regulations you guys put up with. When I'm driving through Wisconsin, I do the least I can do, which is to give you guys lots of room and not be a jerk-ass. I plan on being a cop in the future, so I'll be sure to consider truckers' battles as I interact with them. Thanks to you and your fellow truckers for keeping the shelves full of stuff I like to buy. Our big snowstorm several days ago kept the trucks from getting through and shelves went empty. Of course, I'm sure not everyone made that correlation." Well, Amanda, you're probably right about that. And thanks for saying so. We truckers love it when people don't think their shelves are stocked through teleportation. Also glad to hear that you're going to become a cop. We need more of them with common sense and consideration. I'll admit that many of them are pretty cool. Most cops would have given me a chance to leave. Lots of cops also look the other way when we park illegally, drive 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, have one tiny clearance light out, or most importantly, ignore the fact that we're idling our trucks in a non-idling jurisdiction. To those officers, we truckers truly thank you. And last up, FL Trucker Wife says, "You did the right thing by calling the chief. Glad you're able to get a non-point violation as well. Just be careful next time you're around there. If that officer gets wind that you called and had the ticket changed, he may stalk you. I speak from experience." Whew, well, thanks for the warning, Casey. I know I'll be looking out for him. Once you get a ticket somewhere, you always remember where it happened and are overly cautious when you revisit the place. Ain't that right, truckers? Well, once again, you peeps are awesome. You've sent in lots of comments and stuff. I really appreciate it. Always gives me a little something extra to read on the podcast. So keep them coming, and here's how you can do that. So, are you on e-logs yet? Love them? Hate them? Tolerate them? Why? Or if you're still on paper logs, what are you going to do if your company decides to switch to e-logs? Are you going to stick around, or are you going to shag like Austin Powers? I'd love to hear your feedback. Just type TD061 into the search bar at abouttruckdriving.com and leave your comments. My email address is truckerdump@gmail.com, and I can often be found hanging about on Twitter, where I'm at Todd McCain. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there's a couple of videos showing different kinds of e-log units on the blog. Links in the show notes. Well, enjoy your new year. So until next time, drive safe, and stay out of my way.